Raikkonen,
Oops.
Evans,
Can't believe it.
Slash, and bash as we do proper motor racing. Welcome everybody, thank you. Thank you so much. Now we begin with the BMW M5. For the last 25 years, it has been the best fast saloon, which is a bit of a problem for BMW every time they want to replace it, as Richard Hammond shall now explain.
This is the outgoing M5 in action, and straight away you can see the problem.
It's brilliant. Big 500 horsepower V10 up front, naturally aspirated. It's just distilled essence of single malt driving pleasure. And that gives BMW a problem much like that faced by the makers of Die Hard 4 or of Cheryl Cole's 2011 calendar. This is a personal analogy, but it works for me. The problem is this: where to go next?
Well, this is where they've gone next. It's the brand new M5. It costs £73,000, and on paper, it sounds like a much tamer beast. For starters, the magnificent V10 has been replaced by a more polar bear-friendly V8. When you're driving along, you can certainly hear it.
But then you would, because they've fitted it with a system that pipes a synthesized version of the exhaust note through the stereo. That's kind of cheating, isn't it? And thanks to additions like the 7-speed double-clutch gearbox, this new M5 now weighs 90 kilograms more than the old one.
At first glance then, it seems like the M5's rock and roll days are over.
Oh dear, I seem to have accidentally pulled up alongside the old M5 for what looks like the makings of a drag race. Yeah, there's a man in a white coat and everything.
3, 2, 1,
Oh, that's some power. Getting ahead. Yeah, you see, this is probably a good time to tell you more about that V8. It's got 2 turbos, which gives it 552 brake horsepower. 52 more than the V10. And more torque. A lot more torque. And it's quick! Yeah! Had you worried for a moment then?
More firepower in the engine bay is just the first piece of good news. In the old M5, you got a techno overload of 11 gearshift settings. In the new one, it's a more sensible 3. And with that new twin-clutch gearbox, the shifts are so fast, the gap between them can't even be measured. That's good, but it's not as good as the way this car simply devours corners. Unlike Porsche with their new 911, BMW has not gone for electric steering, but instead stuck with old-fashioned hydraulics.
And it's so much better for it. There's much more of that feedback. It actually lets you know which way the front wheels are pointing.
With the settings in full track mode, you can smoke all day long. And when you've had enough of that, at the touch of a button, it becomes a completely different car.
The old one was always a bit, you know, always straining at the leash. But this one, it can be a proper lunatic M5 or a soothing companion when you just want to drive along the M5. See the motorway, the M...
It's also more economical. It has a bigger fuel tank so it can go harder for longer. And then there's the ride.
It's really, really good. Comfortable. There's no stupid rock-hard run-flat tyres. It feels better than a normal 5 Series.
The new M5 then is not only better than the old one. I'd say that as an all-rounder, it's actually the best car in the world right now. And in some ways, it reminds me of this. The BMW M1.
In 1984, BMW actually took the engine out of that and put it in a 5 Series, and the original M5 was born. The point is, the M1 was the first supercar that could also be civilized in the real world.
And that's what they've done here. Meet the new boss, same as the old boss.
See what I did there?
It's a heck of a thing.
An homage to the Who.
Yeah.
I have to say, that car, I drove it the other day, it is epic.
It is amazing.
It's a phenomenal car. You like the M5 as well, don't you?
Yep.
The only problem with it is that in the past, you bought it, an M5 was worth it because it was so much better than an ordinary 5 Series. But the normal 5 Series now is so good, it's hard to justify spending the extra.
Well, you're quite right. Have you driven the 530 diesel?
Oh.
It's stupendously good.
It's £30,000 less than an M5, and it's an almost completely perfect car.
And did you know as well, actually, in the diesel, you can go, if you're careful, you can go almost 1,000 miles on one tank full of fuel.
Well, that's all you want, 1,000 miles.
God, how old are you two?
Well, I haven't spent the last 10 years being 38, unlike some people haven't.
38, it's a nice age. I'm going to do it again this year.
No, actually, sadly, Hammond, we don't have time to cut you in half this week to see how old you really are, because we've got a very busy show. We also don't have time, I'm afraid, to show you the Stig going round in the M5, but we can tell you we did it in a 1:29.2, pouring with rain, meaningless time. So what we're going to do now is move on very swiftly and do the news.
Yes.
And we begin with this. If you drive a car without a windscreen at 50 miles an hour, your face looks like this, OK? We established this very clearly last week. Now, if you take the speed up to 80, your face becomes